Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 143 of the It's the Pictures podcast. My name is John Gilpatrick, and joining me, as always, is...
Max Colville.
You were delayed there.
Yeah, we're working on a little bit of a delay.
Are we going to be okay, though?
I don't know. You want to, restart and figure it
No,
out?
I mean, it doesn't matter. I just don't want to, create it's early enough where we could do something about this if it's going to be a pain in the ass for you. But if you feel like you obviously have way more editing experience than me, if you feel like it's fine, then we can march forward and you can leave this in or cut it out.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool.
Just go?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's going on with you, Max?
Oh, what's going on with me? It's been
December.
crazy. Yeah, December. It's been crazy around here lately. Lots of movies to catch up on with, and just they come right around Thanksgiving, right, John? They just slam you.
It's a barrage. Yeah, right. Exactly. Like mid to early November. It's like it'd be nice if I had a link to something to check out, and then all of a sudden it's like I have too many links to check out.
Right, yeah. And it's sad too because there was some stuff certainly that was sent that I was kind of interested in, but it's just how can that movie stand to get my attention over these other heavy hitters? So
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. It is tough. You just do the best you can. One of the reasons why I'm always a little bit annoyed that we're doing top 10 lists at this time of year, because I'm I know there's more movies you could watch. There's no way you're telling me this is okay, maybe you feel like you've seen all the big important movies and that's swell, but there's still 3 weeks plus to go. Give something a chance. We used to vote for our awards in early December, and it always drove me nuts. And we finally, I think, a year or two ago, decided collectively that we were going to push it back to the beginning of January, which is something that I'm wholeheartedly in support of. But there are plenty of groups that are, want to be the first out of the gate, and I guess the goodie on them. I know you're definitely earlier than we are, but
we're December 16th this year.
Yeah, it's more appropriate, I think.
Yeah. By then, that day, that's the day Avatar 2 comes out. So it's you would pretty much get most of
the year is over then. Yeah. We're all on Pandora at that point. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's definitely what this time of year is for. It's for cramming in movies. Even me, a notorious non-movie watcher, is watching movies.
Yeah, but it must be gold for you now, because even things that you were just kind of interested in, now they're obtainable and
yeah,
you can enjoy them.
I feel just strangely super duper busy the last couple of weeks with work stuff and traveling for Thanksgiving and just all sorts of stuff. So I feel I haven't had the chance to really dive in the way I wanted to, but I have seen some stuff, and I'm glad about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We also watched only the second Lord of the Rings movie, not the first or the third. I don't know. Maybe I'm speaking just for myself, and maybe you did, but it is the 20th anniversary of The Two Towers. Last year we did a 20th anniversary podcast on Fellowship of the Ring and said we'd revisit this series in 1 year. So here we are. And we're going to just deep dive into what is my favorite Lord of the Rings movie. So I'm kind of excited to do that. Before we get to all that stuff, there's been, I feel a fair amount of news. Probably the biggest thing is the Sound and Sight, whatever
it is,
BFI Top 100 that came out beginning of December. We actually did an episode around the time when voting was open for this, where we announced our top 10 movies of all time, which was very fun. So go back and check that out. We both, I think, realized late into that podcast that we had the same number one movie, which was very funny because we didn't know each other's list going in. But yeah, the top 100, I guess we had a little bit of crossover with our list, but it was definitely an out there list in a lot of ways. Chantal Ackerman's Jean Dielman, I'm not going to try to pronounce the rest, was voted the number one movie of all time, moving up 20 some slots from its placement in 2012. And Vertigo then slid from 1 to 2, and Citizen Kane from 2 to 3. So I don't know. What were some of your thoughts when you saw this list come out?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff I expected. I think like some of the movies that I had on my list, like Tokyo Story and
Hmm.
2001 and In the Mood for Love, I certainly expected to be up there. I think like
Yeah,
In the Mood for Love was a pretty big jumper this year. It's
yeah, it
like
was like number 5 or something.
yeah, and that was pretty impressive. But uh, as told, like a lot of the movies you and I picked for our list, I mean, they showed up somehow on the list in some way. I mean, even like you had like The Godfather at 12.
Mm-hmm. And then number
Um,
2.
yeah. Uh, so a lot of great stuff. I think like some people were saying one of the biggest jumpers, which was cool, was Do the Right Thing, because I guess it was like 127 in 2012, and
Jesus.
now it's like 24,
Yeah,
and it's an
that's good.
appropriate jump. It's like a reappraisal of just how good that film is and important. And
Sure. Yeah, no,
uh,
that's good. That's good.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, John, it's funny. You were saying like you were glad you weren't online for the people being upset that now the number one film of all time is directed by a woman.
yeah,
And I guess like director Paul Schrader was very upset.
yeah. He's
Uh,
always upset.
about something, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I generally like his movies, but yes, he does have strong opinions, whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that he always puts like his own movies at the top of his like best of the year list whenever they come out, which is I kind of like respect. And but yeah, this was like very like what's going on, blah blah blah. This is crazy. Um, I don't know. I was definitely like kind of thinking like this was going to be a nightmare of a discourse. I really like didn't pay like super close attention, so I wasn't sure if it really got there. I'm sure that like there was plenty of that out there in some corners of the internet, and probably a zillion people just patting themselves on the back on other parts of the internet. I do think that like I find it a little bit weird that like we're putting movies that are like 2 years old on best of all time lists, like Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Personally, like
yeah,
great
that
movie.
was a big one. That was at like number 30 now.
30, yeah. I mean, Get Out is another movie like I love. I mean, it's much further down in the top 100, but like I think that that's kind of wacky personally. And I don't know. I think Jean Dillman's a very good movie. But I also like look for, if you listen to my top 10 list, you probably would realize that I kind of like look for like a little bit more of an entertaining bend to my like favorite movies. But maybe some people think of like favorite and best differently. I used to. I feel like I don't do that anymore. Um, and I was kind of bummed. I mean, like, not that these people need more praise, but do think it's a little bit weird to have a top 100 list without a Steven Spielberg movie or a Coen Brothers movie or a Terrence Malick movie. Feels a little bit incomplete, but like none of these things are perfect, especially when you're like trying to form a consensus among many, many people. And I think opening up the voting to a much more diverse set of critics was, certainly good, and I think challenging the canon is a harmless exercise. So yeah, I shouldn't even say a harmless exercise, like there's good to be
No,
had from that.
and
So
John, like for a long time, I was interested in Gene Delman, and I had just never really watched it, and it's just its placement as number one made it so like, oh yeah, now I have to put it on my list to at least watch it. So I think like that is important, and that's where a list like this can really help. Is just like helping people find stuff that they might not be aware of or
mhm.
might have not taken the jump with yet.
So I guess we'll do this all again in 10 years, and I'm sure have another great time with it. In the meantime, speaking of best movies, focusing specifically on 2022 this time, there was some, announcements of the top titles of the year. The National Board of Review voted for, what was it, Top Gun Maverick?
Yeah, I think so.
And then AFI also announced its list.
Yep, it's 10.
They just do a top 10.
Yeah.
Did they pick a best movie, or is that like
Yeah.
coming at an
No,
award show?
I think they just do a top 10.
Gotcha. Okay,
And
so we ended up
what
seeing.
I think you're looking at that. So while you're there, I think the New York Film Critics Circle also announced they picked Tar as
Yeah,
their best film.
they did, and they did acting awards as well. The AFI top 100, or sorry, not top 100, top 10 included The Fablemans, She Said, Nope, The Woman King, Women Talking, Avatar: The Way of Water, Elvis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Top Gun Maverick. Oh, and Tar, excuse me. Oh, and Banshees of Inisherin. I don't know how many movies I even named. I was just
No,
reading through the headline.
Banshees
Now
gets an
here's like the
honorable
full.
mention because it's not. Banshees gets an
Okay.
honorable mention because it's not an American film.
Oh, understood. Okay, that makes more sense then. Okay, because I saw it listed here. So yeah, so that's, I mean, probably not far off from, a lot of like very consensus top tens, and maybe a top 10 or close to a top 10 that we're going to end up seeing in January when the Oscar nominations are announced, right? Okay, Max. So, one more little bit of news before we do some take a trip to Helm's Deep, I guess you could say. The the DC extended universe. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Are is had like a little bit of a shakeup, I guess, this week with kind of a controversial cancellation of Wonder Woman 3, at least insofar as it took the entire week for like I think people to understand exactly what happened, and I'm not sure I still totally do. So can you kind of catch me up?
Yeah, I can catch up on that one. So apparently, like word came out that the new heads of DC, we talked about it a few episodes ago, like James Gunn and another guy are going to head up the projects now. They weren't going to go ahead of a Wonder Woman 3 for whatever reason, and people were going to be upset at that, right? It's like the Flash is getting this big summer tentpole movie, and then you're going to cancel Wonder Woman 3. That doesn't look too good. The news outlet The Wrap had a additional article that said like director Patty Jenkins had given DC Comics a treatment of what she thought Wonder Woman 3 should be, and they didn't necessarily agree with her, and they said they'd look at any revisions that she wanted to do, but it seems like at least how The Wrap painted the article was that she didn't want to make any additional changes to the treatment, and it was either that way or she was gonna move on to other projects. And currently, that's where it's headed. I mean, Gal Gadot is still currently attached as Wonder Woman, so they could go with another director if she's game for that, or we'll see how that franchise goes.
Yeah, the second one was just such a bust. It's
Yeah, it
like
was.
I feel like it's like a franchise that like I just sort of assumed was like dead. That like, so when this kind of came up, I was like, oh, they're like making another one of those, I guess, but maybe not now. So I didn't really think too much of it, but at the same time, like, she was the first female director to get to direct a superhero movie, and the first one she did was outstanding. I think mostly outstanding. I shouldn't, like, the ending I thought was gobbledygook, but
Right.
it was a good movie. And it's kind of a bummer that like it seems like it ended poorly, right? The partnership, but whatever they've got cooking, I think is probably going to be one of these long term visionary plans and blah blah blah. And we're going to get a little bit more direction out of the DC franchise, probably so that it resembles Marvel, which everybody seems to be growing tired of. But what do I
that's a
know?
that's a great idea, right? To make it like Marvel with the thing that people are
Let's
getting
make it like
being.
Marvel, but 15 years too late.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. I think that there's definitely still some news to drop, I guess, and I'm not sure any of that's going to be imminent, but I guess we'll get some more direction soon. So let's talk about the Two Towers. Now, I said up front that I just watched this. I didn't watch the first in lead up to it or the third afterwards. Last year, I watched the first movie in the franchise, and I just like couldn't help but like watch them all in succession. But I wanted to kind of do this like in isolation because one of the questions I had was like, does it kind of like stand up on its own as a movie, or is it really just a chapter of a big story? I don't know that I really got an answer to that. I think that it's a little bit of both, but I do still really love this movie, and I think that it's definitely my favorite of the three. Do you want to talk a little bit, just kind of set it up and sort of tell us your big picture takes?
Yeah, sure. And John, you are far better than I am in this case because I did not entirely do my homework. I did not watch Two Towers this
Oh,
year. Um,
that's fine. You've seen it
um,
times. I'm presuming that we can
yes,
have this conversation.
I've seen it dozens of times.
Yeah,
I did do a kind of like a recovery in my mind of the major beats and make sure I remember the characters and what goes on here. And
sure.
I'm pretty sure that I feel comfortable talking about Two Towers. So my history with the movie, famously, when I saw Fellowship of the Ring, I was blown away. I think I saw it like 3 times in theaters,
Yeah,
and then Two Towers, I also very much enjoyed. I think I saw it twice, and then um, I was looking forward to like Marathon Day. They had this big promotion
oh,
with
sure, yeah.
all three movies, and there was no way I made it. You know, like I think I ducked out like halfway through Fellowship because I had seen the other two movies like so many times.
Yeah, right.
And I just came back for Return of the King because that was like the premiere. Um, and no, I think Two Towers works. I find it an interesting thing for you to do, John, is to try to watch it without the beginning, the Fellowship or Return of the King, because it's kind of hard to take out of context now because in your mind you can fill in the gaps of what comes before and what comes after.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, it doesn't require me to watch the first one anymore to understand everything that's happening in the second one because I've just seen these enough times and kind of marinate in the story that that's okay. But to kind of set it up at the end of Fellowship, there's like these different parties. Everybody's kind of separated a bit, and you have Frodo and Sam still trying to make their way to Mordor, but doing so alone until they meet up with Gollum, who's kind of tracking them, trying to get a hold of his precious. And it's the first time we really spend time with Gollum in the franchise. He's seen like in very, very kind of small bits and pieces in the first movie, but here he's like a fully fleshed out character, and really one of the reasons I think this movie, works so well. And then separately, Merry and Pippin have been taken by some Urukai, and are being brought to Saruman. And I think the thought that they were the halflings that were supposed to be brought to him, but they grabbed the wrong ones, and eventually they are able to escape and get into the forest, and are picked up by some Ents, including I believe his name's Treebeard,
Yes,
the sort of leader there. And then finally, there's the trio of Aragorn and uh, uh,
Gimli.
Gimli, sorry, Legolas, and they are trying to get Merry and Pippin back because they, sort of decided that Frodo and Sam are on their own path, and the best thing we can do right now is try to get the others. Of course, Gandalf is the other, outstanding member of the Fellowship, because Boromir
He's
is the
dead
ninth
though.
person he died, and Gandalf we presume died in the first movie when he fell, after the "You Shall Not Pass" debacle, I guess. And and but the first scene of this movie, we see that he did actually survive, but his kind of whereabouts are unknown, after he fights and destroys the fire
The
beast,
Balrog.
Balrog. Yeah, right. That's kind of like the setup for everything. We end up spending a fair bit of time going into Rohan, which is sort of this like new land that was undiscovered and really not even talked about in the first movie. It's like a realm of men, and they are like horse lords, I believe, where they like all ride
Yeah.
horses and love horses. Not in a way that's like weird, but like in a way that's pretty normal.
Not in a bestiality way, but
Yeah, it's not like like not like the characters of Warhorse. They're all like pretty normal guys and gals around horses, so that's good. But no, I'm joking. Theoden is like the king of Rohan, and he's like kind of under a spell, and very like crusty. And then he's really crusty. It's like the only way to describe it. And he's played by Bernard. I think his name is Bernard Hill, who is the also the captain of the Titanic. So he had like a nice little Christopher Lee-esque run of being in blockbusters from '97 to 2002. And then there's Eomer, who's played by Carl Urban. He is like one of the sort of lead writers of Rohan. And then Eowyn is Miranda Otto, and she's she's Theoden's niece, right? And
new
she
love interest.
she will become a love interest. Yeah, like sort of. Yeah, that's a little bit murky, but and then the other like kind of big new character is Faramir, and he's the brother of Boromir, who was Sean Bean in the first movie. And Faramir is like the less his like sort of storyline is more fleshed out in the third movie when we meet his like crazy dad. But
Right.
he's like kind of son of the steward of Gondor, and like not really as respected, and so he like wants to do something to bring glory to his name, and ends up kind of encountering Frodo and Sam and thinking that using them to win his father's approval is a good idea, but sort of talks himself out of that. So those are like all the major new characters, I guess. And I think for the most part they're all pretty relatively interesting, at least. I think
Like
like
it now, what is like Worm Tongue? Like, is he like new to the second movie? I think. Like,
I believe so. Yeah. So he's like the guy who it has Theoden under the spell, and he works for Saruman. So he's like allied with Saruman, who's Christopher Lee, and Christopher Lee is really like the main villain in this movie. It's kind of an interesting situation because in the first one he's like established as an ally who becomes like a villain, but he's always like kind of like serving Sauron, right? Like it's always like
yeah,
Sauron is number one, and then Saruman is kind of like his helper. Uh, but this movie like is all Saruman. Like Sauron's like hardly spoken of, and not really a major factor. It's all kind of like our heroes versus Saruman, and I feel like that kind of works well because like we never really see Sauron. He like
yeah. He doesn't have a face.
yeah,
He's
he
not
has
like a
teeth
guy.
in deleted scenes, but that's really it. But no, I think that like having like a villain that you can kind of like see him in action it
Very
serves the
helpful.
movie
Yeah, I
well.
agree with you.
Yeah. So that's really good. The like really, I think the biggest like thing here is the Battle of Helm's Deep, and it's very far into the movie. It's a concluding like half hour roughly. But at the time, I mean, you I'm sure remember well. Like this was like heralded as like the great action scene of, yeah, one of the greatest in history. Like of how big it felt and how much is going on. And I guess I'm kind of like, I know you didn't watch this movie like very recently, but like, do you feel like whenever the last time you saw it was like that it kind of holds up well?
Yeah, I want to get into Helm's Deep in a little bit,
We'll
John.
save that. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So the other big piece of like VFX that's important in the movie I mentioned earlier is like we're spending time with Gollum really for the first time, and this was like I feel like our introduction to Andy Serkis in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, and like Weta Digital's work
Yeah,
on this movie is pretty phenomenal, and the CGI work. It's like you can see it nowadays when you watch the movies because like you know what to look for.
yeah.
But back then I was like, other than the obvious stuff, right? I was like, where's their CGI? I remember like there's scenes where like the actors will look like really small and they'll run against the backgrounds, and like for a long time like I didn't register that as like them being 3D like CGI
Yeah,
versions of them. I thought like, oh, this is just like a really far shot and
yeah,
you can't see it. But certainly modern video technologies have made it so these images are sharper than ever, and so yeah, you can catch some of that CGI more so. But yeah, I think Andy Serkis' work as Gollum, if that didn't come to pass, if like they couldn't figure that out, these movies wouldn't be half the movies they are.
yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree. He is like probably the MVP of, you know, I don't know if I want to say like the whole franchise, but I feel like he plays such an important part in so many ways, to the plot, like to just the quality of the movie and how much he brings. I feel like it's just like this iconic kind of performance and voice and everything, and like it kind of transcends like the Lord of the Rings and the movies, um, where it's like you can hear it, you know, when you think of it. It's just kind of interesting. Um, and it's just it felt like to me, and obviously I was young and not like super plugged in, but like this was like the first recollection. And I read like a lot of like Entertainment Weekly and stuff at the time. I felt like this was like the first time where like people were talking about this, like, you know, you like you mentioned, Weta effects, like I'm sure they were working before the Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers, but like this is my first recollection of that stuff in like the dialogue about a movie, so I feel like it was, you know, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it was some groundbreaking work. And it's funny, like I want to know, John, um, when I asked you into this project, you said you had never seen the extended editions of these movies.
That's right. Yeah, I didn't. I
And
watched them all last year. I did not watch the extended edition of Two Towers this year, but I have now seen all the extended editions. But it has been a calendar year since then.
so you still prefer just the theatrical cut as opposed to
For me, it
doing the
wasn't like
extended.
prefer. It was just a matter of like trying to squeeze in as many things as I could before we were recording, and I felt like the extra half hour I could get back would probably be good, whether it was for sleep or something else. Um,
Sure, sure, sure. But at the end of
to
the day,
me, yeah.
do you find that the extended edition had a lot of things that you appreciated that the
So
extended cut?
I do remember because I was thinking about this. Like when we talked last year, and I watched all of these, I remember telling you that I felt like I didn't feel like the extended editions were dramatically better than the theatrical editions for any of the movies. I felt like the material that was added to the Two Towers, I felt like kind of served that movie the best versus the other two, because I didn't feel like the extended stuff in Fellowship of the Ring was like particularly memorable or important at all. And I felt like the Return of the King is already long enough that like it didn't need more material. So I felt like the Two Towers kind of had like the appropriate middle ground of like it's not like creating this like unfathomably long watching experience, and also the scenes they're showing us are, you know, hefty enough where I'm like, okay, I can see why this is included here, and I think I'm glad I watched that, you know. So if you're gonna
What
watch one
what
extended edition, I'd say do this one.
Yeah, one of the scenes that I really like in this extended cut is Theoden's son gets
Yeah,
killed, and Theoden doesn't really know that at the time because he's under the spell. And once he's healed, he has a true funeral for his son, and it's just like a really great scene. I was sad that that one was cut, and you know, John, it's for me, it's like not every scene that they took away is like something that I'm like, oh god, I missed that. But then like if it was me and I could pick and choose, that would be like the ultimate. I
yeah.
guess like there's like some extra stuff of like Merry and Pippin like after the battle at the end of the movie where they're just like smoking or I'm just like, yeah, this is okay, but I didn't need this.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think that there was a lot of those for me in the first extended edition, because there's so much of that movie is like the party scene in the Shire and stuff, and I felt like that stuff gets like blown out, and I'm just like, okay, like I don't know that I needed more of that. You know, it's fun, but it's not like super relevant. So I don't know. I think that like this one hits the right notes, and I agree with you. I remember watching like the funeral and like, thinking that was nice. And my kind of general thoughts on like most of the Rohan characters is like I found them interesting. I think everything that happens with them in this movie is pretty interesting, but like there's not really like a major like emotional attachment to any of them. I feel like that kind of happens in the third movie because it's like you'd spent some time with them now, and it's like, oh yeah, I like those guys, like they're all right. And I feel like maybe you would have gotten to that quicker if you had kind of like that funeral and everything that sort of goes with that story, like a little bit more prominent in this movie.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, so I think that those are some of the bigger points of the Two Towers. The Gandalf, as we mentioned, is back. He is Gandalf the White now instead of Gandalf the Gray, so he's got like a nice new look, kind of a glow up for our
Do
guy
you do
here.
you do you think like the way that do you think that the way that he's portrayed now in the second one is that he's less warm? Because like some part of me is like him when he was playing Gandalf the Grey, he was like more like, oh, your best friend or your grandfather who you haven't seen in a long time and you want to be friends with, and then like once like he falls and gets into that battle and becomes Gandalf the White, it's like, oh, he's all business now, and
I mean, I think
he has a slight turn.
I think the difference is that like his sort of emotional connection is to the hobbits, and like he really doesn't spend much time with the hobbits in this movie. Like he eventually is gonna, I think, in this. Do they even reconnect with Merry and Pippin in this movie, or does that happen later?
No, it does happen.
Okay, yeah, but he's not with Frodo and Sam at all. And I feel like
No,
so it's more like business with like Legolas and Aragorn and everybody. So that's kind of what you're getting. But there's also like a weird moment where like when he meets up with them again, and they're like Gandalf, like blah blah blah, and somebody said Gandalf the Grey, and he's like, oh yeah, that's what they called me, or something like that. And it's like almost like he's like a little alieny. It's
right.
like do you like you don't remember what your name was. So yeah, that's like kind of strange, and I don't feel like that was well like kind of explained or developed, because like otherwise like he's not like, who are you, it's like he doesn't remember his own name, but he remembers all these other people, and like every
Yeah.
like political thing that must be remembered about this entire world. So yeah, it's a little bit of a like weird characterization, I guess. And then he does like also disappear like for a very long time, from like basically like the halfway mark of the movie till the very end.
Right, because he has to go find the horse riders.
Exactly right. Yeah, yeah. He has to meet up with some of our other friends here. So, the score of the movie is like really good. Howard Shore obviously composed it. Is there anything that you feel like from the scores of like the three movies, like do any of them kind of stand out over the others?
Well, the thing was that I loved about the Two Towers score, John, is like the theme that he made for Rohan.
Well,
Right,
okay, yeah, I totally agree with
I
you. I
think
think
that that's really
it's one
yeah.
of do 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 do.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, yeah. I love that.
I love that too. It's one of my favorite like musical, compositions and like movies in general. But certainly, like I love that the most about these movies for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, he did phenomenal work for all three movies, but that in particular stood out for me with Two Towers and um, some of the other sounds he made. It's funny when you get these movies and they're scored well, you can't like imagine how anybody else could score them differently. And I watched like maybe 3 episodes of the new Rings of Power TV show, and
Yeah,
Howard Shore only does the theme song. He doesn't do like the main score for the show. I think like forgive me if I'm wrong, audience, but I think like Bear McCreary does the score for Rings of Power, and it's fine, but it's just not the same memorable work that Howard Shore did.
Yeah, that's too bad, but yeah, it's also really like kind of hard to live up to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's the equivalent of what, like John Williams did the first Harry Potter movie, and then like he set the tone for all of them,
Yes.
and they just reused it.
Yeah, basically, yeah, with like little variations here and there. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's. I'm glad that you felt the same way about the Rohan like music cues because I think those are really fantastic. Um, I think we're kind of at the point where we gotta do the Helms deep dive.
The deep dive into Helm's Deep.
Exactly. So, what are some of your thoughts on this? Like, yeah, very very extended action sequence.
So it's funny that Theoden has like he recites a poem that like it's in Tolkien's text, and it's funny. Like I'll recite the poem to my wife like all the time because I'm just like
Oh,
this is this is
romantic.
yeah, this is so cool, and she gets so tired. I'm like, where are the horses with the riders? And she's like, stop. Yeah. So yeah, I love how not only is the battle itself great, but like the lead up to the battle, right? There's a lot of uh
Mm,
goings
yeah.
on to it, and you have the planning. They said like, oh, they shouldn't go to Helm's Deep because they'll be stuck there, and
Hmm.
this whole army's coming to attack them, and they're just hoping that this impenetrable fortress will save the day.
There's a lot of
And
really like they I think do a really good job of kind of like developing the geography of it. So it's like before the battle starts, you understand that like there's I like I'm not going to recall all of it, so I'm going to sound like an idiot for saying like they make it memorable. But you know, like there's this part where you're like you can't let them get past, and here's where everybody's going to be, and then the arrows are going to come in from this area and then you have to stand behind the door with the swords, so it's like you sort of feel like you understand like their battle plan, which I think is just kind of fun. Um, and yeah, I think that like there's also some really good human moments where there's like a young boy who's like fighting and he's much younger than you'd think a fighter should be, but he has to do it. And Aragorn gives him his uh, uh, armor plate or whatever, and just kind of humanizing him further. And I feel like that stuff is really good. And then the elves show up, and there's this moment of like, the elves and men will stand together once more and such, and sort of like, okay, maybe we can actually do this. We got the elves on board.
yeah, and it's just like it's funny, John, because like I'm a person who's watched Game of Thrones, and you watch that, and you're like, oh, they tried to do an epic night battle too, but you couldn't see anything.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
And
right. Oh my god, what a disaster!
yeah, so like here we are years ago with Two Towers, and they do like this epic night battle of rain, and you can still pick things out. They still managed to do a really entertaining night battle without like having to make it so you couldn't see it.
Yeah, no, it's really well lit. It's um, I think that the Urukai are like really well kind of designed creatures as well. And we see them in the first movie. Obviously, these are like the like orc sort of hybrids that Saruman is like growing underground. It's like very, 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 very weird. But I think that they're good, and there's some like they have some moments too, which is kind of fun because it's like a lot of like back and forth of like we won the first like little volley here, but then we got one over on you because we blew up your retaining wall, and so on and so forth. So it's like it just keeps going on, and
And John, I really like the different siege weapons that the enemy brings. It's like first they bring like ladders, and then they have these like tower things that they can get up to Helm's Deep, and then of course they have the weapon X, which is like the bomb to like blow up part of the wall. So I like how that keeps building too.
Yeah, no, that's all really good too. I guess the one thing like I would say is that like the scaling definitely doesn't seem like as seamless as it did to me when I saw the movie back in 2002, and like that shouldn't, I guess, be a surprise, but like I always thought of this movie as kind of like almost like Helm's Deep, where it's just like unimpeachable. Like you can't say a bad thing about the CGI. It's like I can't believe they did this. They'll never top this. And I will say, like they've definitely topped it. It looks a little bit dated, but not so much that like it takes you out of the movie, which I appreciated. Obviously there's a lot of fun interplay between Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas, in particular the last two, and they're kind of counting their kills, which carries over into the next movie. And, that's all good stuff. And then you get finally kind of building up to this, like, hey, we lost and let's ride out. Let's kill as many of these MFers as we can. And that'll be our like last like moment of glory. And then just as they do, here comes Gandalf on the seventh day or whatever it was that he said,
Yeah, the
and
light on the seventh day.
yeah,
Yeah.
to the east or something. And he's there with his horsey riders, and that's it. And then we win. We don't see it, but it's just like we're understood that that's all that needed to happen. But
Yeah, and it's really interesting that at the same time that that's going on, they're really showing Merry and Pippin and the Ents attacking Saruman. So it's not just the Helm's Deep battle, right? But you're getting another angle as well.
yeah, for sure.
So what's our next question here, John? I think it was
Well, why is
why.
this my favorite?
Yeah, why is this still your favorite out of the trilogy?
Um, I think to me, like it just has the least amount of flaws. And I like obviously really like all three of these movies. It's one of my favorite trilogies, franchises, and movie history. But I feel like the beginning of the first and the end of the third are like just really. They're not bad. It's just like it's just too much. It's just bloat. And I feel like this one really doesn't have much of that. It's like a weirdly tight 3 hour movie. Just at least insofar as like I feel like every scene has a purpose, and like the characters are well developed without like having to be like beaten over the head with it. And I feel like it does a really good job at
Is there a
kind of
way that
like
you can rank the three different?
rank the three different movies.
I think we're lagging again, but John, is there any way that no rank the three different storylines like Frodo and Sam, and then Pippin
Hmm,
and Merry and the Ents, and then the three
sure.
warriors there?
I would say for sure for me it's like the Aragorn storyline with going to Rohan, doing all the Rohan things, and then Helm's Deep. Like that's the most enjoyable stuff in the movie for me. And then after that, I would say Frodo and Sam and Gollum, just because Gollum is such like an interesting wrinkle. I would say like when he gets kind of tied up with Faramir, it loses a little bit of steam, but not not so bad. And then Merry and Pippin and the Ents, like it's kind of fun and funny, but like definitely the least important thing here. As it's going on, of course, like where it ends is very important, but I think it's really just kind of a long walk, and they talk a
Yeah, yeah,
lot, but it's fun. It's not bad. It's just the least consequential of the three kind of like thrusts of the story.
yeah. It seems like it's almost like filler at some cases because they're like, "Oh, why can't you just hurry up and do something?" And Treebeard's like, "Well, it takes us a long time to figure out what we're going to do."
Yeah, basically. It is funny that like Treebeard is voiced by Gimli.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, and John, are we gonna do a Two Towers episode without like repeating the stupidest line of trivia about Lord of the Rings ever?
I don't know because I don't remember,
Oh,
so I guess we're not.
yeah, John, the one where Aragorn kicked the helmet and he broke his toes.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there you go. I told someone new. I guess like when they're looking for Merry and Pippin, he kicks a helmet in like anger that he thinks like they've been killed or eaten or burned up, and he actually broke his toes.
That sucks. I've broken toes before. It's not fun. And I've never had to like do action scenes afterwards in a blockbuster
Yeah.
movie. Um, so what about you? I mean, not your favorite, but you still like are a fan. Obviously, of this movie. Do you feel like it's the weakest of the trilogy because it's sort of middle child syndrome?
No, I've always felt that the third one was the weakest.
Yeah, me too.
But go figure. That's the one that won all the awards, right? Uh,
Well, it was really just,
uh,
I think, for the whole shebang.
right. But Two Towers does have the difficulty of being the middle child, right? It has it has a ton going on in it, and so much so that they took Sheila the Spider, who actually appeared in the novel of Two
Right.
Towers, and moved her to the Return of the King, to give that story more action, I guess.
That's a good trivia
Yeah,
factoid.
that was the right decision, I think. Yeah, I figured like this would be like the only place that I really talk about this film because I didn't plan to do that much writing on it. But it's a weird one because at points it's like really graphic and disgustingly so, but then on other points it's um this really weird love story, and it follows our lead Taylor Russell. She was I believe in Waves, so this isn't her first go around, but this is certainly a major star turn for her because she's the star on the screen, and it has this weird disposition to eat people, and she you find this out like one night where she's going to like this party, and she just like is getting close to this girl, and then she like eats the girl's finger, and you're like, oh my god. And it's from there her father checks out. He's like, I can't save you anymore from yourself, and you need to find your own way. And so she picks an adventure for herself really, and wants to find her mother, who she's never seen before, or at least for a long time. And on the way she finds different people who are like her. One played by um, what's his name, the Bridge of Spies guy. um, you remember that actor, British actor? Oh, I'm talking about the British actor from Bridge of Spies. Yes, Mark Rylance is in this movie, and he plays another creepy cannibal. And so I guess our lead Taylor Russell finds him, and they eat somebody together. And she quickly leaves him because he's weird even for a cannibal, if you could imagine that. So she goes off, and she finds another young man played by Timothy Chalamet, and he has like the same disposition as she does, and he agrees to follow her on her trip, and finding her mother. And I don't know, it's like I said, it's weird because like it has these moments of like extreme violence and like really heavy gore, but then like it's kind of heartwarming, and it definitely has like it reminded me a lot of Terrence Malick's Badlands in a way, because they're like just traveling along, and they're like kind of like degenerates, right? Because they eat people. If they get arrested, that's the end of the game. Um, but yeah, I thought it's in this weird place for me. I admired the movie, and like I think it's worth seeing and checking out, but at the same side, I'm like not sure everyone will love it because of the subject matter.
I'm like so on the fence about it because I'm like curious about it, but like I just know how I am about like really gory shit, and I've heard that this one's pretty rough on that front. Yeah, so I feel like I'm probably
Yeah,
gonna
it's
just end
pretty
up
gory.
skipping it, but I'm like a little bit regretful about that because obviously I'm a big Guadagnino fan, and it sounds interesting. It sounds like other than like being like disgustingly gory, it sounds like something I'd be into. But yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna get there. So we'll see. I mean, maybe if I really power through some of these other movies and I've seen everything else I want to, I'll kind of like try to do something with one eye half open. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, for me, like being at home did help. Like
Oh
some of
yeah,
the
yeah,
stuff
I
that I
think you're right.
felt was like really
I mean,
obtuse,
I would
I was
have a
able to like
hard time
fast
doing that in the
forward
theater.
through.
I think, especially
So
with how loud and big everything gets, and at home
yeah.
you can kind of minimize a little bit more. Um, but cool, yeah. I guess I'll do my Tar movie first, which is the movie Tar. And I think we've talked about it kind of at length on the podcast over the course of the better part of the year that this is one of my most anticipated movies of 2022. I've been kind of long awaiting a Todd Field movie. It's been 15 years, so like quite a wait. And I don't know. It's a weird one. Like uh, I'm still a little bit unsure how I feel about it. I guess I should say, like, I know we've talked about it on the podcast before, and everybody probably knows, but it's the sort of story of the world famous fictional composer Lydia Tarr, played by Kate Blanchett. And she is a conductor in Berlin and kind of gets into some difficulties personally and professionally, which maybe you want to know more about, and maybe you don't, but that's kind of the extent of the plot of the movie. Um, and like I think I really liked it. I don't know if I like loved it. There were moments watching the movie where I honestly did feel like kind of bored. It's very long. It's over 2.5 hours long, um, and it feels long. It didn't feel like something that kind of breezed by for me. I will say like the last hour probably breezed by, and I was like really engaged with that. But leading up to that, there were periods where I was really engaged and periods where I was kind of like, do I want to look at my phone or not? But that being said, like I recorded earlier this week my other podcast, There Will Be Pod, and we talked about it. And Sammy, my co-host, this was his number one movie of the year. He like absolutely loved it, and I do feel like it's a movie that like I have, besides just the recording that episode. Um, I have enjoyed talking about Tar more than I think I actually enjoyed watching it, and I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. Um, but it's just there's a lot to chew on, and I found that kind of um, you know interesting, and have enjoyed the few conversations I've had with folks about Tar. So I feel like it's a movie that'll probably grow in my estimation, and I'm sure I'll watch it again, and maybe I'll be like more in tune with like everything that's happening in the first 90 minutes or so. Um, I feel like, and I don't want to get too much into it, but has there been like some dialogue about the like sort of last act of Tar online?
Yeah, so I saw this article from Slate just posted like maybe a day or two ago that almost there's a sequence in the movie where Lydia Tarr is going to visit her new protege, cello player, and she takes this like teddy bear or something into this cave system, and there's this idea that maybe like from there the movie like totally flips on its head, and um, maybe that's like some otherworldly thing, and like the movie was dealing with ghosts at some points. Um, So I mean, there's certainly varied ways to look at it, and I would encourage you to look at that, John, as someone who's seen the movie and might want to check out other ways to see what people were talking about. But I think I remember the most important thing when I was coming out of um, Tar was I thought like this is like art house movie extraordinaire, and like anybody who's not into art house movies should like need not apply. uh, I thought like you said, it's very talky at the beginning. It's like very much like, oh, I like this classical music, and this one's really great, and I can't wait to finish Mahler's Fifth, and you can't do it, and you can't steal my notes, and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, this is stuff like how many people, how do we care about this? And like in some ways, yes, it develops Lydia Tarr as a character, but in other ways, yeah, it's a long ways to go until finding out ultimately what
Yeah,
her path
yeah.
is
No,
going to
I
be.
thought that's really interesting. I'm very curious to read the article you mentioned because I felt like I was. I mean, I don't think it's meant to be necessarily conclusive one way or the other, and it's just kind of fun to play around with theories. But I was having senses of that. I was just like, oh, like kind of what's really happening here. But either way,
And obviously,
yeah,
I'm not gonna talk about what happened at the ending, but there's many articles
yeah.
about that
I thought the last
ending
shot
as
was
well. So
like just amazing.
if
I
you've
just
seen the
thought
movie,
the way that concludes is so outstanding.
yeah.
That really kind of like elevated the movie for me. So, big fan, definitely. I'm just not sure like how big yet. I don't know where it's going to end up on a list of mine at the end of the year, if it will or not. But I'm kind of
I, I I was a fan, John, of the 20 minutes of credits at the beginning. I thought that was pretty clever too. I was like, I remember when we used to do this, and all movies should do this. And then I remembered that Marvel movies are a thing, and nobody wants to sit through Marvel
yeah,
movie
for
credits
sure.
before that starts.
But yeah, so that was my tar experience. Yours has an Ava in front of it. Not the Way of Water just yet. I don't think you've seen that yet, right? Not yet, but you
No,
watched
not yet.
the original.
Yeah, I watched some of the original, and it's been like maybe like 8 years at least since I've seen some of it, and it was astounding how much I forgot about that movie. It's like it left like no like memorable footprint on my brain at all, because I was just like, wow, I don't remember these sequences, but like when you see them, you're like, oh yeah, these are really cool and really well developed. I was watching a Blu-ray of the movie, and I don't think I had ever seen Avatar without seeing it in 3D in the theater, right? Like I think like that was my like big experience with the movie. I don't think I watched it too many times at home. And it's very obvious that James Cameron, the director, had developed the movie for 3D, and a lot of the shots are composed with 3D in mind. So it's kind of weird watching the movie and like saying, "Oh, this is why he did this," and like why this cut pops out over here because like they had 3D in mind, and so when you're watching that, that's kind of distracting, and just like the way that like some of the things are developed feels like kind of video gamey because of that whole construction. And the story has always had its issues. I mean, guy gets into a body, and it's kind of like Pocahontas-esque story, like befriending the natives and has to protect them in the end. um but yeah, it's just funny. Like I was even commenting on Sam Worthington, who is like the lead of Avatar, and like how his whole career is just that he was pretty much a voice actor for Avatar. Because like, let's face it, he's not seen on screen for all the movie. Some of it, yes, but like, that's not what people remember. They just think of like white guy A as the Avatar character, and yeah, there's a lot of goofy stuff going on, and I'm sure that's going to be the same way of Way of Water. I'm sure like I'll go ooh and ah, the visuals are awesome. I'm not gonna go to a press screening because it's only like 3 days before like the movie comes out. So down the street, 3D, the new the hyper rate change that
The frame
Ann
rate.
Lee tried to do. You know, the
Yeah.
120 frames per second. Yeah, I guess like that's the way to see this, and like it's like mixed in. It's not
Okay.
like a constant high frame rate. It's like varied in there, and so like yeah, I'll go see it and see what's up with it. I mean, James Cameron makes a good movie, but yeah, I just reflecting back on Avatar, I was like, I for such a huge momentous movie, I couldn't. I was like, I can't believe I just totally don't remember any of this.
Fair enough. Well, we are going to find out what the way of water is, I guess, very soon enough. And oh
Are you gonna
yeah,
be
I mean,
lured to a
I
3D
have
screening to
collected
see this?
all of the James Cameron stock that everybody, for whatever godforsaken reason, wanted to sell over the last 10 years, and I was like, the Avatar sequels are going to fucking rock, and everybody's going to go see them. I'm like, the projections for the box office couldn't be higher for me to take the over, and I don't know. I just think like everybody is kind of like was a little bit foolish to think he was going to like do this and make it flop and like be stupid and unworthy. Like, he hasn't ever done that in his life. So, um, say what you will, whether it's memorable or not. Like, I haven't watched Avatar in a long time. I've seen it at home. I've seen it in the theaters. Like, I don't remember every plot detail, like maybe the way I do Lord of the Rings, but I remember how I felt watching that movie in the theater, and I was just like, "This is so fucking cool." And there's a reason why Hollywood like bet so hard on 3D afterwards, because like, and why it failed, right? The reason why 3D didn't work is because nobody with, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people could do it the way that Cameron did in Avatar. And it was like, this is dumb. Like, this doesn't look good. I hate this. And the technology like died. And like, I don't know what's going to happen now that he's bringing it back. My sort of prediction, because I really am expecting it to be like a humongous hit. We already saw like these kind of projections for how much money it's going to make in China, and it's like, okay, like, it's going to be crazy. But I think that like the takeaway from 2022 and the, in my opinion, like likelihood that the box office is really like only being propped up by Top Gun Maverick and Avatar 2, which are two sequels to movies that came out at least 12 years ago. Yeah, is that it's just like,
10
that's what
years
we're gonna
plus,
do.
yeah.
It's like we need to revive everything from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s or whatever. And that's probably gonna mostly suck, but maybe there'll be a few worthy entries in there too.
All right, cool. So yeah, we should have way of water
I
thoughts
guess so.
in the next year. I think this is gonna be, I think this is gonna wrap up
Yeah,
our
we're gonna
year
take a little bit of
for It's the
a
Pictures.
holiday break here. Talk, I'm sure soon enough, but we'll spend some time in the meantime, catching up on titles that we might have missed, especially me, and kind of working on lists and such. We'll check out The Way of Water and whatever else is new to us for the closing stretch here in 2022, and and that'll be it. We'll, I'm sure, still talk to you again soon, Max. I'm sure I'll talk to you, but I'll not make it an on air official. I hope you have a good holiday season, and I guess that's it.
Yeah, John, I hope you have a happy and healthy holiday season as too. This has been already a difficult season with health, with lots of different viruses and stuff going around, and I hope
Yeah,
everybody
sounds good.
stays healthy and
We'll talk to
happy.
you again soon. Thanks for listening.